So the result of this is that in the 1870, the Center Party is formed. And it's important to note that Catholic Germans were not necessarily a fully unified group of people. Just think of the Catholic landscape today, right? I mean, you've got different people on different sides of things, all under the banner of Catholics. But for the most part, they were at this point willing to put aside their differences and they formed this political party. And it's just incredibly important. And this party will have ramifications down to our very own day in Germany. And so the instead of achieving Bismarck's goal of pulverizing Catholic constituents in Germany, he instead makes them more united and more powerful than they had been at any time since the time of the Reformation. And initially they were formed to combat the Bismarck persecutions, but as they sort of died down, Kulturkampf was not successful at all. They became more and more the party became more and more about advocating for Catholic policies, as well as to kind of prove to Germans this new German identity that's taking place within the empire as Catholics are in Germany are beginning to accept that they are now officially Germans, part of this nation state, that Catholics are in fact good citizens. So it's very interesting. And as I just stated, right, the goals shift over the years. It's not like a singular thing that we can point to and say, okay, this is the center party at all times, at all decades, and all years. But there are some key elements to it that I think are worth just kind of pointing out about the Catholic Center Party, specifically up until the ascendancy of the National Socialists. So some of their key goals and platforms, they want to really push the very tempered German patriotism, as we were saying, right, against the accusations that Catholics are this nefarious fifth column that exists within the state that is seeking to constantly undermine things, as well as the Catholic Church since the time of the French Revolution had been hit very hard by Enlightenment ideals. There's a strong anti-modernist streak within the Catholic Church. And within the Center Party, it's no different. So there's a huge pushback within the Center Party against the rise of the secularizing and liberalizing elements of the state that have been taking place, placing them politically to the center right of the German political spectrum. As well, there's strong campaigns in the Center Party against pornography, contraception, sexual liberation. They help to establish more social welfare programs than even the Social Democrats in Germany did. Very interesting thing. They are instrumental in defending Catholic interests in the school system. There's very complex things that are happening with the unification of Germany and what's happening within the school system. So trying to protect young Catholics and how they're educated is a huge part of their platform. There is no general consensus on the J question. J is in the certain religious group that are going to have serious ramifications in the coming years. But there was a sort of general recognition by many that Jays were on the left of many issues that the Center Party pushed or sought to have pushed through. At the same time, as the Center Party were Catholics, they were quick to always recognize the dignity of human life for any human life, be they Christian or non-Christian. So there's a real complexity and nuance that I think is vibrant and healthy within the center party about the J question specifically. And I've kind of thought about how I want to approach this in this lecture, and I'm going to come back to it actually because later on, as we talk about the rise of the National Socialists, I think it'll begin to make more sense where the center party falls. All right, so with the coming of the Second Reich, you also end up with this parliamentary body called the Reichstag. It's the lower parliament. So you have the higher parliament in Germany, which effectively it's if you think of like the Senate versus the House, if you're here in the States, or the Commons and the Lords over Parliament in England and Britain, pretty equivalent to that. You have the Imperial Reichstag up until the World War II and the dissolution of the empire, and then you have the Weimar Republic Reichstag from 1919 to 1933, and this is where most of the debates are going to sit and range and go back and forth within the German state, within the German nation, and at the various states. It's going to take place within the Reichstag. And it's interesting to point out here, I've got a few of these. I pulled these from Wikipedia. I'm going to go through a few more here in a little bit, but just notice that right from the beginning, with the formation of the Reichstag, with the elections in 1871, let's see, the largest party was the National Liberal Party with 117 seats in the Reichstag. Following that immediately is the Center Party. And this is generally the way that Wikipedia drew these. This is a spectrum. So the far left of the semicircle is going to be the far left, and the far right of the semicircle is going to be the far right. And that 56 would be the Conservative Party at this point. So that's as far right kind of as you have in Germany in 1871. But more center right is the Center Party, who have a significant number of seats very early on in the coming of parliamentary system within Germany. And so, as you can imagine, because of that, the Catholics in Germany are and they're well poised to make a difference in the state and to affect things for a positive direction. So, much like the 30 Years' War, the French Revolution, and other events like revolutions of 1848, World War One cannot be underestimated for the sheer tragedy that it brought to the Western world. If you, like me, lament the decline of the West from its glorious past to what it has been reduced to, we need look no further than what happened here. Now, of course, the topic of the war itself is monumental in its own right, but it will have to suffice to say here that for the most part, the German Center Party, while opposing the war in principle, especially as a party, most German Catholics were good citizens, and as Catholics usually turn out to be, they left home to young men left home to go and fight in the war with other Germans, and they fought and died with other Germans. Now, of course, all of this culminates in the disastrous Treaty of Versailles, the most vile, vindictive peace treaty one could conjure up. A peace agreement that guaranteed that there would be a continuation of conflict eventually. And for those of you that aren't aware, basically though there was enough blame that we can say with full accuracy, 2020 hindsight, all these years later, to go around for all sides, the victorious French and English at the Treaty of Versailles placed all of the blame of the war on the Germans, and as a result, the German people were plunged into an economic depression that really devolved into a near mass starvation.
Presenting City of the Immaculata on Patreon. There you will find live streams, pre-recorded lectures with topics on history and theology, including lecture notes, slides, podcasts, articles, monthly book clubs, and there we will be unveiling The Integrated Life, a program designed to help you, your home, and your community become healthy spiritually, mentally, and physically using timeless, holistic methods. Click on the link below to find out more.
So going into the 1920s, I want to, in my own little inadequate way here, kind of help to make sense of what the factions are going to look like because it's going to be 20th century politics are a nightmare to navigate. Just pick one country, right? Any country, and Germany's no different. And if anything, Germany is kind of a hyper in a hyper mode of factionalism in this period, coming all the way up to the seizure of power by the Nazis. And so, what I have here, I've got, again, keep in mind, this is very, very simplified view of kind of where things fall in Germany if you're on a political factions. As always, there's going to be, it's much more matrix like. These things are more connected and they're fluid and things change and shift and move. And this is just my attempt at like a little snapshot just to give you an idea of what the factionalism is like at this time. So, split down the center, right, left, right, just standard kind of politics. And I know I've got the right on the left and the left on the right, but just imagine. So the right in Germany is a little bit more complex because within the right you have the religious right in Germany, which makes up the remnants of the restorationists, the ones that want to return to monarchy. Generally speaking, the center party and the Catholic Party would fall within this group. They kind of want few reforms. Most of those reforms are going to be in regard to labor and protecting women and children and protecting families and then protecting the rights of workers. That's where most of the reforms that they're going to seek are in. As well, you have a slightly modified secular right, which has religious elements. This is going to be kind of the more what we would think of conservatives, even if you think of it in an American context today, where it's this quasi marriage between secularism and Protestantism. Again, they kind of want to see moderate reforms, though at times significantly more push towards secularizing than religious and labor and in social reforms. As well, you have sort of an atheist, strictly kind of secular right that honestly their main identifying feature of them is they almost have this like philosophical Nietzschean will to power. And I'm only using Nietzschean in that sense. I know there is an attempt to kind of blend what the Nationalist Socialists become with the Nietzschean. Now they are in the sense that Nietzsche said will to power, but Nietzsche had his own little like, okay, will to power, and I want to see a power head in this direction. And that's not necessarily what the National Socialists were going to do. But I would put them in that category of might makes right. So that's kind of how the atheists are going to function. On the left, you have basically the secular left, though you may have a little bit of religious leanings in some of the more moderates. The secular left, you have a among the moderates, you have sort of moderate to progressive reforms. Again, they may or may not be religious. And then on the far left, you have the sort of atheist, communist, you have that very scientific Marxian group. And among all of these, I've just kind of got like a shade of a blue and sort of a yellow. The blue is really like national factionalism. That's what they're focused on. And then with the far left, of course, by the time you get to the communists and the Marxists, you're dealing with, they have a much more international identity, especially before Stalinism really seems to take effect and take hold. Stalinism being, a as opposed to Trotsky, who, Trotskyanism is a little bit more focused on the worldwide revolution. Stalinism has a tendency to focus more on the securing communism in one country versus the worldwide revolution. So as far as the German left goes, I think it's important to point out you've the two major opposing sides of the German left at this point in the 1920s. The most powerful and effective group is known as the Social Democrats, and they're your like moderate. They are socialist, but they're very like democratic. They may or may not have a Marxian bent to them. More than likely, they just want to see progressive reforms, very much in line with like the kind of progressive movement that you would see here in the United States. But far to the left of them, you have the ever present threat of the communists who loved to agitate. And remember, at this point, we have Lenin honing in on this art of causing civil unrest to use as a leverage to usher in communists into places of government, or more what they would rather do is have the complete undermining of the social order wherein um, they can have a coup of power, right? And they can just kind of take over power. So you have these two groups sort of battling it with one another on the German left, where the Democrats want to work within the parliamentary system, they want to pass laws, they want to move Germany slightly along the comfortable road of liberalization that takes decades and generations, where the Marxists and the communists, especially in the wake of Lenin, want to cause as much trouble and as much strife and agitate in the streets as they possibly can, and they were not particularly loved by the German people at large. So, in response to the agitators, you begin to see these various organizations forming, especially in the wake of World War One. It's organizations that are formed to sort of combat leftist street agitators, and none more consequential, of course, than the National Socialist Party, which is officially formed in 1920. And some of the unique there's multiple right groups at this time, groups that would fall on that sort of atheist right, but the Nationalist Socialist Party had a few things that were kind of unique about them. One is they're almost like they put it at the top of their list, where other groups sort of had the J question in their list of things. The From the very beginning, the Nationalist Socialists saw the J question as one of directly related to the worldwide communist Bolshevik question. So they saw a J cabal as being responsible for the failures of Germany in World War One, as well as the cultural decline of Germany in the wake of World War One. And they truly believed that the worldwide Bolshevik revolution was synonymous with the J question. They come along to with a clear and almost, I guess I would say, a close second runner to that would be promises to undo all of the horrors that had been unleashed on Germany by the really awful Treaty of Versailles. They also are, as we're saying here, formed with the promise to end the sort of factional violence that one sees in the streets, specifically by the communists. And again, the Germans are not loving the communists in their streets, causing all of this unrest. As well, they have a unique policy of expanding Germany east, so into the Eastern Europe, Poland, on up into like Russia, for what they call living space for more Germans. And as well, they have this policy of suppressing generally what they refer to as weaker Germans. That is, Germans that aren't of a pure German stock. And so they're constantly like promoting the advancement of a pure, stronger Germans. And then as well, they have various infrastructure and labor reforms that they want to get through. Now, the Nationalist Socialists are interesting because Germany's a kind of a unique place, right? The Germans, kind of like you could maybe say the English, aren't necessarily prone to the revolutionary spirit. There's a strong conservative impulse within the German people historically, and the Nationalist Socialists were highly influenced by the fascist right in Italy and all of the things that had taken place in Italy after World War One, and then you have Mussolini's rise to power, basically through a political coup, much in the same way that you maybe would say happened with the Russians. And so when Hitler gains control of the National Socialist Party, he basically wants to emulate what happens in Italy to the German situation, and you have the what's called the beer hall putsch in 1923, which really just ends in failure. The it's the National Socialist attempt